The first time little May touched a piano key, something magical happened. She wasn't even 3 years old, sitting on her uncle's lap during a family gathering at her grandparents' home in a small coastal town. Uncle Tao had been playing a simple melody, and when he stepped away to get a glass of water, May reached up with her tiny fingers and pressed down on a white key. The clear, bright sound made her eyes widen with wonder. May's mother, Lynn, watched from across the room as her daughter pressed another key, then another, giggling at each new sound. Most toddlers would have smashed the keys randomly, but even then, Lynn noticed something different in how May approached the instrument, with curiosity rather than just the desire to make noise. "She's got a good ear," Uncle Tao said when he returned, noticing how May was trying to copy the pattern of notes he had played earlier. "Most kids her age just bang on the keys." Lynn smiled politely but didn't think much of it. After all, May was just a baby still learning to put full sentences together. Lynn and her husband Wei worked long hours at their small restaurant, and while they loved music, neither had any formal training. The old upright piano at her parents' house was mostly for show these days, rarely played except when Uncle Tao visited. But something changed in May after that day. At home, she began to hum melodies she heard on the radio with surprising accuracy. She would tap her fingers on the table during meals, creating little rhythms that matched whatever music was playing in the background. When Lynn sang lullabies at bedtime, May would often correct her if she sang a note wrong. "I think she might have an ear for music," Wei said one evening as they watched their daughter carefully arranging her stuffed animals in a row, singing each one a different tune. "Maybe," Lynn replied, "but piano lessons are expensive, and we barely have time to breathe between the restaurant and everything else." Life continued this way until May's 3rd birthday, when her grandmother surprised everyone by announcing she'd saved up to buy May a small keyboard. "You're spoiling her," Lynn protested. But her mother waved away her concerns. "I've been watching her. This isn't just any child's interest. There's something special there." The keyboard wasn't fancy, just a basic model with 4 octaves, but to May, it was the most wonderful thing in the world. The family gathered around as she unwrapped it, expecting her to show the typical excitement of a 3-year-old with a new toy. Instead, May grew unusually quiet. She ran her small fingers over the keys without pressing them, as if greeting an old friend. When she finally played her first notes, everyone in the room fell silent. May was playing the birthday song someone had sung to her earlier, not perfectly but recognizably, picking out the melody by ear. "Did you teach her that?" Lynn's father asked Wei in amazement. Wei shook his head, watching his daughter with wide eyes. "No, she's figuring it out herself." That night, after May had finally been persuaded to leave her keyboard for bed, Lynn and Wei had a long talk. The keyboard had revealed something they could no longer ignore. Their daughter had a gift. "My cousin teaches music at the community center," Wei suggested. "Maybe she could take a look, tell us if this is really something special or just a phase." The following weekend, they took May to see cousin Jun, who taught basic piano to beginners. Jun had been teaching for 15 years and had seen all types of students. The reluctant ones dragged by ambitious parents, the moderately interested, and occasionally, the truly passionate. "Let's see what she can do," Jun said, lifting May onto the piano bench. May, usually shy around strangers, showed no hesitation with the piano. Her little legs dangled well above the floor, but her hands moved to the keys with purpose. She played the simple melodies she'd figured out on her keyboard. "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," the birthday song, and a commercial jingle she'd heard on TV. Jun's expression changed as she watched. She sat down next to May and played a simple 5-note pattern. "Can you play that back?" she asked. May did without hesitation. Jun played a slightly more complex pattern. Again, May repeated it perfectly. After 15 minutes of this, Jun turned to Lynn and Wei with an intensity in her eyes. "I've taught hundreds of children," she said quietly. "I've never seen a 3-year-old who could do what she just did. What does that mean?" Lynn asked, her heart beating faster. "It means," Jun said, "that you need to find her a real teacher, someone who specializes in gifted children. This isn't something to take lightly." The words "gifted children" hung in the air. Lynn and Wei exchanged glances, a mixture of pride and worry passing between them. They'd always wanted the best for their daughter, but they'd never imagined this. "We can't afford expensive lessons," Wei admitted. "The restaurant barely covers our bills as it is." June nodded, understanding. Let me make some calls. There are programs for children like May, scholarships sometimes. This kind of talent, it shouldn't go to waste. 2 weeks later, they found themselves in the living room of Ms. Huang, a retired concert pianist who now taught only a handful of specially selected students. Her home was modest, but the grand piano in her living room gleamed like a black mirror. Certificates and old concert posters lined the walls, yellowing with age but still proudly displayed. Ms. Huang was in her 70s, with a straight back and hands that moved with grace despite their wrinkles and slightly swollen joints. She watched May with sharp eyes as the little girl approached the piano without fear. "Play something for me," Ms. Huang said, her voice gentler than her appearance suggested. May played everything she knew, and then to everyone's surprise attempted to play a classical piece she'd heard in a cartoon. Her tiny fingers stumbled over the complex parts, but the melody was clear. When she finished, Ms. Huang was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Lin and Wei. "That was Beethoven's Fur Elise," she said. "Or the beginning of it anyway. She picked that up by ear?" They nodded. "From a cartoon?" They nodded again. Ms. Huang pressed her lips together, thinking. Finally, she said, "I'm 76 years old. I told myself I wouldn't take any more students, but..." She looked at May, who was now exploring the piano's pedals with curiosity. Once in a while, very rarely, someone comes along who reminds you why you devoted your life to music in the first place. She squared her shoulders. "I'll teach her. We'll worry about payment later." And so, just after her 3rd birthday, May began formal piano lessons. Ms. Huang was patient, but demanding. She started with the basics, proper posture, hand position, finger exercises, but moved quickly when she saw how fast May absorbed everything. "She remembers everything the first time," Ms. Huang told Lin after a lesson. "Do you know how rare that is? And her hands. Look at how she naturally curves her fingers, how she already understands the weight needed for different sounds." At home, they rearranged their small apartment to make room for the keyboard. We built a platform so May's feet wouldn't dangle uncomfortably while she practiced. Lin adjusted the restaurant schedule so one of them could always be home for May's practice time. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when May wanted to play like other children instead of practicing. There were times when Lin and Wei wondered if they were pushing too hard or not hard enough. But then there were the moments that took their breath away, when May would lose herself in the music, her small face serious with concentration, her fingers finding notes that seemed to speak directly to the heart. 6 months into her lessons, Ms. Huang made an announcement. "I think she's ready for Fur Elise," she said. "The real version, not just the famous beginning everyone knows." "Isn't that too difficult?" Lin asked, concerned. "She's only 3.5, Ms. Huang smiled. "Normally, yes. But your daughter isn't normal, is she? Besides, she already loves the piece. She's been trying to play it on her own. Better to teach her properly than let her develop bad habits." And so began May's journey with the piece that would change her life. Every day she practiced a little more, her small hands stretching to reach the notes, her memory absorbing each new section. Ms. Huang broke down the piece into manageable parts, teaching May not just the notes but the story behind them. "Beethoven wrote this for a young woman he cared for," she explained, speaking to May as if she were much older. "You can hear how the music changes, sometimes happy, sometimes sad. That's what makes it special." May nodded solemnly, somehow understanding even at her young age. The months passed. May turned 4. Her playing improved dramatically with each passing week. What had once seemed impossible for such tiny hands became fluid and natural. One evening, Ms. Huang asked to speak with Lin and Wei after May's lesson. "There's a competition," she said without preamble. "The Young Stars International Piano Competition. It's usually for children 6 and up, but there's no official age minimum. I think May should enter." Lin's mouth fell open. "A competition? But she's only 4. "Yes," Ms. Huang agreed. "And she plays better than many of my past students who were twice her age. The competition is in 3 months. With focused practice, she could be ready. Ready to compete or ready to win?" "We asked." Ms. Huang gave him a sharp look. "Ready to play her best. That's all we can ask of her, or any student. The rest is not in our hands." That night after May was asleep, Lin and Wei talked for hours. Were they pushing their daughter too far, too fast? Was this Ms. Huang's ambition rather than what was best for May? But then they remembered how May's face lit up when she played, how she often asked to practice even when they hadn't reminded her. "I think we should let her try," Wei finally said. "Not for winning, but for the experience. If it seems too much pressure, we can always pull back." Lin agreed, and their focus shifted. The competition became the center of their world. Ms. Huang increased lessons to twice weekly. Mei practiced with growing determination. Her tiny face screwed up in concentration when she hit a difficult passage, her smile radiant when she mastered it. None of them could have imagined where this path would lead. To a stage far away, to judges who would be stunned into silence, to a first-place medal that would seem impossibly large against Mei's small chest. But that was still to come. For now, there was just a little girl, a piano and a piece of music that seemed to have been waiting for her all along. 3 months passed in a blur of practice sessions and growing excitement. The Young Stars International Piano Competition was held in a nearby city, requiring a 2-hour drive from their home. As the day approached, Mei seemed less nervous than her parents, who worried about everything from traffic to whether her special blue dress would be comfortable enough for her to play in. "Remember," Ms. Huang told Mei during their final lesson before the competition, "this is just a chance to share your music with more people. Play from your heart, like you always do." Mei nodded seriously, her small fingers still moving through the difficult middle section of Fur Elise that had given her trouble earlier in the week. By now, she could play the entire piece, though some passages still needed careful attention. When she finished the run-through, Ms. Huang nodded with approval. "Beautiful," she said. "Now let's talk about what will happen at the competition, so you won't be surprised." She explained how Mei would wait backstage until her name was called, how she would walk to the piano, adjust the bench, and nod to the judges when she was ready. They practiced the routine several times, with Mei solemnly bowing at the end as Ms. Huang had taught her. "What if I make a mistake?" Mei asked, voicing her one worry. "Then you keep playing," Ms. Huang said firmly. "Everyone makes mistakes, even the greatest pianists in the world. It's how you recover that matters." The morning of the competition dawned bright and clear. Mei woke early, immediately asking to practice one more time on her keyboard before they left. Lin and Wei exchanged glances over her head. Their daughter's dedication still surprised them sometimes. "Just for 20 minutes, Lin agreed. "Then we need to get ready." Wei's parents and Uncle Tao had driven over the night before and were staying at a nearby hotel. They would all meet at the competition venue. As they loaded the car, Wei noticed Lin's hands shaking slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm more nervous than she is," Lin admitted with a small laugh. "What if the other parents look at us and wonder what we're doing there? We're not music people. We run a restaurant." Wei took her hand. "We're her parents. That's what matters." And look at her, she's excited, not scared. It was true. Mei sat in the back seat humming her piece, swinging her legs, occasionally moving her fingers in the air as if playing an invisible piano. The blue dress she wore had been carefully chosen, comfortable enough for playing, but special enough to make her feel like a performer. The competition was held in a large music school with several performance halls. When they arrived, the lobby was filled with children and parents, many carrying instrument cases. Most of the children were older, 6, 7, 8 years old, making Mei look even smaller by comparison. At the registration desk, the woman checking names did a double take. "Mei Zhang." "For the junior piano division?" she asked, looking at the tiny girl holding Lin's hand. "Yes," Wei confirmed. "She's registered." The woman recovered quickly. "Of course. She'll be performer number 12. The junior division starts in an hour in Hall B. There's a warm-up room down that hallway where she can practice for 10 minutes before her turn." As they moved away from the desk, they spotted Ms. Huang, who had driven separately. She was dressed more formally than they'd ever seen her, in a dark blue suit that made her look like the concert pianist she once had been. "Ah, you're here," she said, smiling warmly at Mei. "How are you feeling?" "Happy," Mei said simply. "I want to play for the people." Ms. Huang's smile deepened. "That's the perfect attitude. Now let's find your grandparents and get you settled." The waiting was the hardest part. They found seats in Hall B, watching as other children performed. Some played with technical precision but seemed stiff with nerves. Others made mistakes but recovered gracefully. The judges, 3 serious-looking people at a table near the front, made notes after each performance without revealing their thoughts. When it was nearly Mei's turn, Ms. Huang took her to the warm-up room while Lin and Wei remained seated, holding hands tightly. Uncle Tao patted Wei's shoulder reassuringly. "She'll be fine," he said. "That kid has something special." Backstage, Mei waited quietly beside Miss Huang, watching as performer number 11, a boy of about 7, walked onto the stage. They could hear his piece onto a Mozart sonata through the speakers in the waiting area. "Are you ready?" Ms. Huang asked Mei as the applause for the previous performer faded. Mei nodded, straightening the skirt of her blue dress. "I'm going to play my best for Beethoven," she said, repeating something Ms. Huang had told her during lessons, that playing your best honors the composer who wrote the music. When the announcer called her name, a murmur went through the audience. Even from backstage they could hear it, the reaction to seeing such a young competitor. Ms. Huang squeezed Mei's shoulder gently. "Remember, from your heart," she whispered. Mei walked onto the stage alone, her small figure looking even tinier against the backdrop of the grand piano. There was a moment when Lin thought her daughter might freeze. The lights were bright, the audience larger than any Mei had seen before. But Mei walked steadily to the piano, and with the help of a stagehand who had stepped forward, climbed onto the bench. The hall fell silent. Mei adjusted her position, her feet dangling well above the pedals. She looked towards the judges and gave a small nod, just as she had practiced, and then she began to play. From the first notes of Fur Elise, it was clear that something extraordinary was happening. Mei's tiny hands moved with confidence and precision, but it was more than technical skill. There was an emotional quality to her playing that seemed impossible from someone so young, as if she understood the longing in Beethoven's melody, the bittersweet quality of the piece. In the audience, Lin felt tears spring to her eyes. Beside her, Wei sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might break the spell their daughter was weaving. Around them, the audience had gone completely silent, leaning forward in their seats. When Mei reached the difficult middle section, her face screwed up in concentration, but her fingers never faltered. The faster passages flowed like water, and when she returned to the main theme, there was a new depth to her playing, as if the journey through the piece had changed her. The final notes hung in the air, fading slowly into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved or made a sound. Then, like a wave breaking, applause erupted throughout the hall. People were standing, some wiping tears from their eyes. Mei's face broke into a wide smile. She slid carefully off the bench and gave a deep bow, just as Ms. Huang had taught her. As she walked off stage, the applause continued. Ms. Huang was waiting in the wings, her usual composed expression replaced by one of undisguised pride. "You played from your heart," she said, kneeling to hug Mei. "No matter what happens with the judging, remember this feeling." But the judge's decision, when it came 2 hours later after all competitors had performed, only confirmed what everyone in the hall had felt during Mei's performance. She had won first place in the junior division, the youngest winner in the competition's history. The shiny medal seemed enormous against Mei's chest as she stood on the small podium. Cameras flashed and the head judge bent down to speak with her. "What made you choose Fur Elise?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I heard it in a cartoon," Mei answered honestly, causing laughter to ripple through the audience. "And then I wanted to learn the real song." That evening, as they celebrated with a special dinner, Mei fell asleep at the table, exhausted from the day's emotions. We carried her to the car, the medal still around her neck. "What happens now?" Lin asked Ms. Huang, who had joined them for the celebration. The older woman sipped her tea thoughtfully. "That depends on what you want and what Mei wants. This competition has opened doors. There will be opportunities, more competitions, special programs for gifted children, perhaps even performance invitations." "She's so young," Lin said, watching her sleeping daughter. "I don't want to push her too hard." "Nor should you," Ms. Huang agreed. "But neither should you hold her back. This is just the beginning of her journey with music." On the drive home, with Mei asleep in the back seat, Lin and Wei talked quietly about the future. The regional news had already picked up the story of the 4-year-old piano prodigy. Ms. Huang's phone had been buzzing with messages from colleagues and former students who had heard about Mei's performance. "Everything's going to change, isn't it?" Lin asked. We reached over to squeeze her hand. "Maybe, but we'll make sure some things stay the same. She needs to be a child first, a pianist second." When they arrived home, Mei woke up just enough to walk to her bed, still clutching her medal. As Lynn tucked her in, May smiled sleepily. "Can I play the piano tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course," Lynn said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "You can play every day if you want to." "Good," May murmured, already drifting back to sleep. "I have a new song in my head. I want to find it on the piano." Lynn sat beside her daughter's bed long after May had fallen asleep, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Today had been just one step on a path that was only beginning to reveal itself. Where it would lead, she couldn't know. But one thing was certain. They would walk it together, one note at a time. The days following May's competition victory brought a whirlwind of changes to the Zhang family's quiet life. Their phone rang constantly with calls from local newspapers, music schools, and even a television station wanting to interview the 4-year-old piano prodigy. Lynn and Wei, protective of their daughter's childhood, politely declined most requests, agreeing only to a short article in the local paper. "She needs to be a little girl first," Lynn explained to Ms. Huang, who nodded in understanding. "Wise decision," the piano teacher said, "but there is one opportunity you should consider." She handed them a glossy brochure for the International Young Musicians Festival, held annually in a neighboring country. The festival wasn't just a competition but also included master classes with renowned musicians, concerts, and a special program for exceptionally gifted children. May would benefit from meeting other young musicians, Ms. Huang explained, and the director of the festival was a colleague of mine years ago. He called me personally after hearing about May's performance. Wei flipped through the brochure, his expression growing more concerned with each page. "This looks expensive," he said finally, "and it's 2 weeks long. We can't leave the restaurant for that long." Ms. Huang nodded. "There are scholarships available. As for the restaurant, perhaps family could help. The festival is 6 months away. You have time to plan." That evening, after May was asleep, Lynn and Wei stayed up late discussing the possibility. The festival would be an amazing opportunity, but it would require sacrifices and careful planning. "My sister might be able to help with the restaurant," Lynn said. "She's been looking for extra work." "And my parents could stay with May when we're working," Wei added. "But the cost?" They looked over their savings, calculating what they could afford. Even with a partial scholarship, the festival would strain their finances. Travel expenses, accommodations, new clothes for May. It all added up quickly. "Maybe we should wait until next year," Lynn suggested, but there was disappointment in her voice. Wei was quiet for a moment, then said no. "If Ms. Huang thinks this is important, then we find a way. May has a gift. We can't hold her back because of money." The next day they began making plans. Wei's cousin, who worked at a travel agency, helped find affordable flights. Ms. Huang submitted May's application and a recording of her playing Fur Elise to the festival committee. Lynn's sister agreed to manage the restaurant with help from their regular staff. Most importantly, they talked with May about the festival, explaining it in terms a 4-year-old could understand. "There will be lots of other children who love music," Lynn told her, "and teachers who can show you new things about playing the piano. Will it be like the competition?" May asked, her eyes wide. "A little bit," Wei said, "but longer and with more music and learning." May thought about this, her small face serious. "Will you and Mama come too?" "Of course," Lynn assured her. "We'll be with you the whole time." May nodded, satisfied. "Then I want to go. I want to learn more music." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the festival committee. May had been accepted with a full scholarship, an unprecedented offer for someone so young. The letter mentioned her extraordinary musicality and rare potential. Ms. Huang wasn't surprised. "They recognize what I saw from the beginning," she said simply. With the financial burden eased, Lynn and Wei threw themselves into preparations. They knew this was just the beginning of a journey that would likely take May far beyond their small town. Both felt a mixture of pride and anxiety about the path ahead. Meanwhile, May continued her lessons with Miss Huang, who decided it was time to expand her repertoire beyond Fur Elise. She introduced simpler Bach pieces and Mozart's variations on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which delighted May with their playfulness. For the festival, Ms. Huang explained, she should demonstrate range. Fur Elise shows her technical ability and emotional maturity. The Bach will showcase her precision, and the Mozart variations are perfect for showing her natural musicality and joy in playing. May absorbed the new pieces quickly, her small hands growing more confident with each passing week. Her ability to memorize music after just a few hearings still amazed everyone who taught her. As the festival drew closer, an unexpected challenge arose. The restaurant's roof began leaking during a heavy rainstorm, requiring expensive repairs not covered by their insurance. The money they had set aside for travel expenses would now be needed for the roof. "We can't back out now," Wei said, looking at the estimate from the contractor. "May's been working so hard." Lynn nodded, though worry creased her forehead. "Maybe we could take out a small loan?" Before they could decide, their doorbell rang. Outside stood Uncle Tao, along with several other family members and even a few regular customers from the restaurant. "We heard about the roof," Uncle Tao said, "and about May's festival." Behind him, the small crowd nodded. One by one, they handed envelopes to Lynn and Wei containing cash, checks, and cards of encouragement. "The community wants to support May," explained Mrs. Liu, their elderly neighbor who came to the restaurant every Sunday. "She makes us all proud." Lynn fought back tears as she invited everyone inside. Their small living room was soon crowded with people sharing stories and expressing confidence in May's future. May herself moved among the guests, thanking each person as her parents had taught her to do. When everyone had gone, Lynn and Wei counted the contributions, enough to cover both the roof repairs and their travel expenses. With a little left over, "I can't believe they did this," Lynn said softly. Wei put his arm around her shoulders. "They believe in her, just as we do." The weeks leading up to the festival passed in a blur of preparation. May practiced diligently every day, her repertoire growing stronger. Ms. Huang arranged for her to play at a local nursing home, her first real public performance since the competition. To help her get comfortable with an audience, the residents of the nursing home were enchanted by the tiny girl who played with such feeling. One elderly man, a former music teacher himself, asked to speak with May afterward. "I've heard many young pianists in my time," he told her, his voice wavering with age. "But few who truly understand what the music is saying. You listen with your heart, little one. Never lose that." May didn't fully understand his words, but she sensed their importance and nodded solemnly. Finally, the day of departure arrived. May's suitcase was packed with carefully chosen clothes, including a new performance dress in soft yellow, her favorite color. Ms. Huang had given her a special gift, a small notebook with beautiful music paper. "For when melodies come to your mind," she explained, "you can write them down." The airport was overwhelming for May, who had never flown before. She clung to Lynn's hand as they navigated the busy terminal, her eyes wide at the crowds and noise. But once on the plane, she was fascinated by everything. The tiny windows, the sound of the engines, the feeling of lifting into the air. "We're flying, Mama," she whispered excitedly as the ground fell away beneath them. "Like birds." Lynn smiled, pushing aside her own nervousness about flying. "Yes, Baobe. Like birds." The festival was being held in a historic city known for its rich musical heritage. They arrived in the evening, too late for any festival events, but in time to check into the modest hotel where they would be staying. The room was small but clean, with a view of a park where a string quartet was playing for passers-by. May went straight to the window, listening intently to the music drifting up from below. "Different from piano," she commented. "But pretty. Those are string instruments," Wei explained. "Violins, a viola, and a cello. You'll hear many different instruments at the festival." May nodded thoughtfully. "I want to try them all." That night, as May slept between them in the hotel bed, they had booked the cheapest room with just one large bed. Lynn and Wei talked in whispers about the days ahead. "Do you think she'll be overwhelmed?" Lynn worried. "The program says there are master classes with famous pianists. What if they're too harsh with her?" "We considered this." Ms. Huang said the festival director knows May's age. "I'm sure they'll be appropriate. And we'll be with her the whole time." "Everything's changing so fast," Lynn murmured, stroking May's hair as she slept. "Sometimes I worry we're pushing her into growing up too quickly." "Look at her," Wei said softly. "She's still our little girl. Music isn't taking her childhood away, it's giving her a special one." Lynn nodded, finding comfort in his words. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new experiences, and perhaps the beginning of a remarkable journey for their daughter. But tonight May was simply a sleeping child, dreaming perhaps of flying planes or beautiful music, the ordinary and Extraordinary dreams of a 4-year-old whose gift was opening doors neither she nor her parents had ever imagined. Morning. Arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the hotel window. May woke early, eager to begin her first day at the International Young Musicians Festival. She bounced on the bed, barely able to contain her excitement while Lynn brushed her hair and Wei double-checked the festival schedule. Remember, if you get tired or overwhelmed, just tell us. Lynn reminded her daughter as she tied May's hair with a yellow ribbon that matched her dress. It's okay to take breaks. May nodded impatiently. I won't get tired. I want to see everything. The festival was being held at a prestigious music conservatory, with buildings that looked like palaces to May's young eyes. Stone columns rose to high ceilings and the walls were adorned with portraits of famous composers. As they approached the registration desk, May's steps slowed, suddenly aware of how much bigger everything and everyone was. Look at all the children, she whispered to Wei, who was holding her hand. Indeed, the lobby was filled with young musicians, most carrying instrument cases. Some were clearly teenagers, tall and confident. Others looked to be elementary school age. But May appeared to be the youngest by far. At the registration desk, a friendly woman with glasses checked their names against a list. Her eyebrows rose when she saw May. "Ah, you must be our special scholarship recipient," she said, bending down to May's level. "The director has been eager to meet you." She handed them a folder containing name badges, a detailed schedule, and a map of the conservatory. The opening ceremony begins in 30 minutes in the main concert hall. After that, students will be divided into groups based on age and instrument. Lynn looked concerned. "Our daughter is only 4. Will there be others her age?" The woman hesitated. "She's our youngest participant this year. The next youngest pianists are 7. But don't worry. We've arranged special accommodations for her schedule, and Director Petrov is personally overseeing her program." As they made their way to the concert hall, they passed practice rooms where snippets of music escaped through partially open doors. Violin concertos, cello suites, and piano sonatas all blending together in a beautiful chaos. May turned her head from side to side, trying to catch every sound. The main concert hall took their breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with musical angels. The stage held a magnificent grand piano that gleamed under the lights. Rows of velvet-covered seats were quickly filling with students and their families. They found seats near the front, where May could see everything. As they waited for the ceremony to begin, a tall man with silver hair approached them. "You must be the Zhang family," he said with a slight accent. "I am Director Petrov. Welcome to our festival." He knelt to speak directly to May. "And you are the young pianist I've heard so much about. Ms. Huang has told me wonderful things about your playing." May, usually talkative, suddenly turned shy, pressing against Lynn's side. "She's a bit overwhelmed," Wei explained. "This is all very new." Director Petrov nodded understandingly. "Of course. It is a big place with many new people, but music is a universal language, yes? When you play, you will feel at home." He explained that he had arranged for May to join the 7-year-old pianist for some activities, but would also have one-on-one sessions with teachers who specialized in working with very young gifted students. "We want to challenge her, but not exhaust her," he said to Lynn and Wei. "The schedule I've arranged includes plenty of rest time and opportunities to simply listen and absorb." The opening ceremony began with a performance by last year's competition winners, a string quartet of teenagers who played with impressive skill. May watched them with wide eyes, completely absorbed in their music. When they finished, Director Petrov gave a welcoming speech, speaking of the universal power of music and the joy of nurturing young talent. "Each of you brings something unique to our festival," he said, looking around the hall. "Some bring technical brilliance, others bring deep emotion. And some," his eyes found May in the audience, "bring the pure joy of discovery that reminds us why we fell in love with music in the first place." After the ceremony, they consulted their schedule. May's first activity was a group class with other young pianists, followed by lunch, then her first one-on-one session with a teacher named Professor Chen. The group class was held in a room with 6 pianos. 5 children, all appearing to be around 7 years old, were already seated with a cheerful teacher who introduced herself as Ms. Novak. She welcomed May warmly, but Lynn could see the other children eyeing May with curiosity and perhaps a touch of skepticism. "Today we're going to play a game that Helps us listen to each other, Ms. Novak explained. Music isn't just about playing your own part well, it's about listening and responding to others. The game involved each child playing a simple musical phrase, which the next child had to repeat and then add to. It moved around the circle, the musical sentence growing longer with each turn. Some children struggled to remember the entire sequence, but when it came to May's turn, she repeated the complex phrase perfectly and added her own musical idea with confidence. Ms. Novak couldn't hide her surprise. The other children looked at May with new respect. By the end of the class, 2 of them had asked to sit next to her at lunch. Lunch was served in a sunny courtyard where musicians of all ages mingled. May sat with her new friends, a girl named Akiko from Japan and a boy named Theo from France. Despite language differences, they communicated through smiles, gestures, and occasionally, by playing imaginary piano on the table. "Look at her," Wei said to Lin as they watched from a nearby table. "Already making friends?" Lin nodded, relieved. Music really is a universal language. After lunch came May's one-on-one session with Professor Chen, a petite woman who had once been a child prodigy herself. The session was held in a small practice room with a beautiful upright piano. "I hear you play Beethoven's Fur Elise," Professor Chen said. "Would you play it for me now?" May nodded eagerly. With Wei's help, she climbed onto the bench and adjusted her position. Then she began to play. The familiar notes filled the room, but something was different. The acoustics of the practice room gave the music a richness May hadn't experienced before. Her face lit up at the sound, and she played with even more expression than usual. When she finished, Professor Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You have a gift for finding the heart of the music. That cannot be taught." She spent the next hour working with May on specific techniques, hand positioning, pedal use, with a special adapter that Wei helped attach so May's feet could reach, and dynamics. Rather than treating May like a curiosity, she worked with her as she would any student, just adapting her explanations to suit a 4-year-old's understanding. "Music is like telling a story," she explained. "Sometimes you whisper," she demonstrated by playing softly, "and sometimes you speak loudly." Her fingers pressed more firmly on the keys. "The composer gives us clues about how to tell the story, but we must find our own voice within those clues." May nodded, absorbing everything. When Professor Chen demonstrated a technique, May would imitate it perfectly, then add her own small variation. The professor noticed this. "You're not just copying, you're creating," she said approvingly. "That's very good." By the end of the session, May was tired but glowing with excitement. "She taught me to make the piano sing," she told her parents as they left the practice room. The rest of the day included a children's concert, where young musicians performed for each other in a relaxed setting, and a dinner where families mingled. May fell asleep early that night, exhausted but happy. The next few days followed a similar pattern. May attended classes, had one-on-one lessons with different teachers, and watched performances by older students and visiting professionals. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries. On the 4th day, Director Petrov asked to speak with Lin and Wei while May was in a class learning about the inner workings of a piano. "Your daughter has remarkable talent," he said without preamble. "I've been teaching for 40 years and I've seen many gifted children, but her combination of technical ability, emotional maturity, and pure joy in music is extremely rare." Lin and Wei exchanged glances, pride mixing with concern about what might come next. "The festival competition begins in 3 days, Director Petrov continued. "Normally, we would not encourage someone so young to participate, but in this case, I believe she is ready if you and she wish it." "Would she compete against the older children?" we asked. "In the preliminary round, yes, but the judges would take her age into account. If she advances to the final round, she would be judged in a special category." "What do you think we should do?" Lin asked. "We don't want to put too much pressure on her." Director Petrov considered this. "Ask her. Children often know their own minds better than we give them credit for. And remember, win or lose, the experience of performing on that stage will teach her something valuable." That evening, they talked with May about the competition. To their surprise, she didn't hesitate. "I want to play for the judges," she said firmly. "I'm not scared." "Even though the other children are older?" Wam asked. May shrugged. "Music doesn't care how old you are." Lin and Wei couldn't help laughing at her simple wisdom. It was decided May would enter the competition. The next 2 days would be spent preparing, including selecting which pieces to play and practicing in the main concert hall to get used to the acoustics. As they tucked May into bed that night, Lynn felt a mix of emotions: pride, nervousness, and a touch of disbelief at how far they had come from that first moment when May had touched a piano key at her grandparents' house. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked May one more time. "It's okay to change your mind," May yawned sleepily. "I'm sure, Mama, I want to share my music." Lynn kissed her forehead. "Then that's what you'll do, and we'll be right there with you, no matter what happens." Outside their hotel window, the lights of the historic city twinkled like stars. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a haunting melody on a violin. May fell asleep to that sound, her fingers twitching slightly as if playing along in her dreams. The morning of the competition arrived with a gentle rain tapping against the hotel window. May woke early and went straight to the small notepad Ms. Huang had given her, drawing musical notes with her colored pencils. Lynn watched her daughter, amazed at how calm she seemed compared to her own jittery nerves. "Are you ready for today?" Lynn asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. May nodded, not looking up from her drawing. "I dreamed about the music. It was perfect in my dream." Wei emerged from the bathroom, adjusting his tie. They had all dressed in their best clothes. Wei in his only suit, Lynn in a dark blue dress she had bought specially for this trip, and May in her new performance outfit, a soft ivory dress with a yellow sash that made her look like a tiny sunbeam. "Remember," Wei said, kneeling beside May, "today is just about sharing your music, not about winning or losing." May looked up from her drawing with a serious expression that seemed too old for her 4-year-old face. "I know, Baba, but I still want to play my very best." The competition was being held in the conservatory's grand concert hall, the same magnificent space where the opening ceremony had taken place. Now, however, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Young musicians clutched their instruments, some pacing nervously, others sitting still with closed eyes, mentally rehearsing their pieces. They checked in with the competition coordinator, who gave May a number, 23. She would perform in the middle of the preliminary round, which included 48 competitors across all instruments. Only 12 would advance to the finals, which would be held the following day. Director Petrov found them in the waiting area. "Ah, the Zhang family. How are you feeling today, May?"
"Happy," May replied simply, which made the director smile. That is the perfect way to feel before playing.
"Remember, the judges want to hear not just the notes, but the joy behind them." He explained that each competitor would perform one piece in the preliminary round. Those who advanced to the finals would play 2 pieces. May had chosen to play Fur Elise for the preliminary round, and if she advanced, she would add Bach's Minuet in G for the finals. "The judges know she is much younger than the others," Director Petrov assured Lynn and Wei. "They will take this into account. But truthfully, when she plays, one forgets her age." As they waited for May's turn, they watched other young musicians perform. There was a 7-year-old violinist whose fingers flew across the strings with impressive speed, a 9-year-old cellist who played with deep emotion, and several pianists of various ages, all remarkably talented. May watched each performance intently, sometimes closing her eyes to focus purely on the sound. When a 12-year-old boy played a complex Chopin piece on the piano, she whispered to Wei, "His fingers are dancing, but his heart is sleeping." Wei was startled by her observation. The boy was technically flawless, but somehow mechanical in his delivery, exactly as May had perceived. As the minutes ticked by, May remained calm while Lynn grew increasingly nervous. She gripped Wei's hand tightly, her palms sweaty with anxiety. "She'll be fine," Wei whispered. "Look at her, she's not even worried." It was true. May was now chatting quietly with Akiko, her friend from the piano class who had already performed and was waiting for the results. The 2 girls had bonded despite the language barrier and age difference. Akiko had performed well but had made a small mistake in the middle of her piece. May was patting her hand comfortingly. Finally, May's number was called. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and looked at her parents. Lynn bent down to hug her. "We're so proud of you," she whispered. "No matter what happens." May nodded and followed the stage assistant to the entrance of the concert hall. Wei and Lynn took their seats in the audience, hearts pounding. The hall fell silent as May walked onto the stage. There were a few murmurs of surprise at her small size. Many in the audience hadn't realized one of the competitors was so young. The grand piano looked enormous compared to her tiny figure. A stagehand brought out a special bench with extra height and helped her get settled. May adjusted her position, took a deep breath, and looked toward the judges' table. 5 serious-faced adults looked back at her, pencils poised over their scoring sheets. In that moment, Lynn held her breath, afraid her daughter might finally feel the pressure of the situation. But May simply nodded to the judges, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. From the first notes of Fur Elise, it was clear that something extraordinary was happening. May played with a combination of technical precision and emotional depth that silenced the entire hall. Her tiny hands moved across the keys with confidence, finding nuances in the familiar piece that many adult pianists missed. When she reached the more complex middle section, Lynn tensed, remembering how May had occasionally struggled with this part in practice. But today, May's fingers flowed through the challenging passages without hesitation, as if the music were coming not from practiced movements but from some deeper understanding. As the piece returned to its famous melody for the final section, May added subtle variations in timing and emphasis that made the well-known tune sound fresh and personal. Her face showed complete absorption in the music, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth during the lighter passages. The final notes hung in the air like a question, then faded into a silence so complete you could hear the rain tapping gently against the high windows of the concert hall. For a moment, no one moved. Then, like a dam breaking, applause erupted throughout the hall. People were standing, some wiping tears from their eyes. Even the judges, who had maintained professional neutrality throughout the competition, were smiling. May slid carefully off the bench and gave a deep bow, just as Ms. Huang had taught her. As she walked off stage, the applause continued. Director Petrov was waiting in the wings, his eyes shining. "Bravo, little one," he said softly. Beethoven himself would have been moved. Lynn and Wei embraced May as she returned to them, their words of pride and love tumbling over each other. May seemed happy but not overly excited. To her, she had simply shared the music she loved, the way she always did. The preliminary round continued with the remaining competitors, but there was a buzz in the hall about the tiny girl who had played with such maturity. When all 48 competitors had performed, there was a 1-hour break while the judges deliberated. The Zhang family went to the conservatory's cafe, where May had hot chocolate with whipped cream, a special treat. Other competitors and their families stopped by their table to compliment May's playing. Some asked how long she had been taking lessons, amazed to learn it had been little more than a year. When the results were announced, May's name was among the 12 finalists. She was the youngest by far. The next youngest was a 7-year-old violinist. Lynn and Wei were thrilled but also concerned about the pressure of the final round. "Are you sure you want to continue?" Lynn asked May as they walked back to the hotel to rest before dinner. "You've already accomplished so much." May looked puzzled by the question. "But I haven't played my Bach piece yet," she said, as if that settled everything. That evening, they called Ms. Huang to share the news. The piano teacher was overjoyed but not surprised. "I knew from the moment I heard her play that she had something special," she said. "Give her a hug from me and tell her to play from her heart tomorrow just as she always does." The next morning dawned bright and clear. May awoke with a slight cough. The excitement and the change in climate had left her a bit sniffly. Lynn worried, but May insisted she felt fine. "Just a little frog in my throat," she said, repeating a phrase she had heard her grandmother use. The finals were structured differently from the preliminaries. Each finalist would perform 2 pieces, with brief comments from the judges afterward. The concert hall was packed. Word had spread about the extraordinary 4-year-old pianist. May was scheduled to perform last, which meant a long wait. She spent the time drawing in her music notebook and listening intently to the other finalists. Every competitor played beautifully. These were the best of the best from around the world. Finally, it was May's turn. Her cough had worsened slightly, and Lynn had been giving her sips of warm tea with honey throughout the morning. As May walked on stage, Lynn whispered a silent prayer that her daughter would make it through both pieces without coughing. May began with Fur Elise again, playing it with even more confidence than the day before. The audience was entranced, the judges leaning forward in their seats. When she finished the Beethoven piece, there was warm applause. and May smiled before adjusting her position to begin the Bach minuet. The Bach piece showcased a different aspect of May's playing. Precise, clean, with a dancing quality that matched the spirit of the minuet perfectly. Despite its technical challenges for such small hands, May played with apparent ease, her face serene and focused. As she played the final notes, a small cough escaped her, but she maintained her composure and finished beautifully. The applause was thunderous. One of the judges, an elderly man with white hair, was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. The head judge, a stern-looking woman who had barely smiled throughout the competition, spoke into the microphone. "Young lady," she said, her voice softer than expected, "you have shared something very special with us today. Tell me, why do you play the piano?" May thought for a moment, then answered with simple honesty. "Because the music lives inside me and it wants to come out." A murmur of appreciation ran through the audience. The judge nodded, satisfied with the answer. The award ceremony was held that evening. All 12 finalists would receive recognition, but only 3 would receive the top honors. Lynn and Wei held hands tightly as the announcements began. May sitting between them, swinging her legs, her cough now mostly gone thanks to rest and more honey tea. The third place winner was announced, the 12-year-old boy who had played Chopin. Second place went to the 7-year-old violinist who had impressed everyone with her technical skills. Then came the moment of truth. And the first place award for this year's International Young Musicians Festival competition goes to... The director paused, building suspense, though most in the audience had already guessed. "Mahjong piano." The audience erupted in cheers. Mee looked up at her parents in surprise, as if she hadn't expected this outcome. With a gentle nudge from Wei, she walked to the stage to receive her award, a crystal trophy that seemed almost as big as she was. The head judge bent down to speak to her as she handed over the trophy. "You reminded all of us today why we love music," she said. "Never lose that pure joy in playing." May nodded solemnly, then broke into a wide smile as she held up her trophy for her parents to see. Later that night, as they packed their bags for the journey home the next day, Lynn asked May how she felt about winning. May considered the question carefully, her small face serious in the lamplight. "Happy," she said finally. "But I would still play the piano even if they gave the trophy to someone else." Wei laughed softly. "That's why you deserve to win, little one." As May fell asleep, the crystal trophy catching moonlight on the hotel desk beside her, Lynn and Wei talked quietly about the future. There would be more opportunities now, more decisions to make. How to nurture May's extraordinary gift while ensuring she had a normal childhood. How to balance their modest resources with the world of possibilities that was opening for their daughter. "One step at a time," Wei said, echoing Ms. Huang's advice from long ago. "We'll figure it out together." Lynn nodded, watching her sleeping daughter. "She's still our little girl first, a pianist second." "Yes," Wei agreed. "But what a pianist she is." Outside, the historic city was quiet under a canopy of stars. Tomorrow they would return home to their small apartment, to the restaurant, to the community that had supported them. But they would return changed, carrying not just a crystal trophy, but the knowledge that their daughter had touched hearts around the world with her music, and this was just the beginning of her journey.